Good morning. Morning, everyone. Good morning. Morning, thank you. It's wonderful to see so many folks this morning. We appreciate you being here on the last day of the Better Building Summit. Everybody have a good day yesterday? All right, well, we have a really exciting plenary for you this morning. Hopefully not that exciting, but we have an exciting plenary for you guys. And before we get started with our keynote speaker this morning, I just want to do something really quickly. I got a lot of nice thank yous yesterday, and I'm the person up here, but there's a whole team of folks that are behind this summit and behind all the work we do. And you know that, because you're the people working with them. So if you guys will just indulge me a minute, can I just ask the Better Buildings and Better Plants team, all of you to stand up, please, and be recognized for all of your hard work on this? It truly takes a village. And I just want to do one extra shout out, and that is to the summit team for this year. As you can see, there's a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, a wonderful hotel to work with. But Marissa Schatz and the RETEC team, if you'll also help me just give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Okay, and now it's my pleasure to introduce Tricia Miller. Tricia is the Senior Director for Industrial and Building Emissions at the White House Climate Policy Office. Tricia's had a number of leadership positions. Previously, she was the Chief Innovation and Development Officer at Elevate, but Tricia has a special place in all of our hearts at Better Buildings because many years ago, she was a senior advisor at HUD, and she was the person that was responsible for including multifamily home owners and managers as part of the Better Buildings Challenge, and for that, we will always be grateful. So with that, Tricia.
Good morning. It is so great to look out in this room and see the leaders from across the Better Plants, Better Buildings, and now Better Climate Challenge. I was sitting in Maria's office, this was a decade ago, when I was at HUD, and we were looking at the success of launching the commercial Better Buildings Challenge, and we thought, what would it look like if we got 100 multifamily building owners and partners together to be part of this fabric of action on climate and energy? And she looked at me and said, let's do it. And we can get to 100. And I'm so thrilled that here we are with over 100 multifamily partners who are drawing from the Solution Center and the work of leaders across the country to make that vision a reality. And I would just encourage us to keep going. We want to hit all of the commercial and multifamily building sector. Our president committed to 4 million commercial building retrofits, so we need everybody in this room and across the country to be part of the solutions and the challenge. So thank you for a tremendous momentum behind the Better Climate Challenge now and the audacious goal of cutting carbon emissions by 50% in a decade. We are relying on you as our partners with the federal government in order to drive climate action, and we want to lift up the tremendous work that you're doing each and every day to become more energy efficient, to decarbonize your portfolios, to reduce waste and water, and to support our communities through climate equity and Justice 40. I had the chance to be with one of the Better Plants partners, Cleveland Cliffs, that I think is represented somewhere in the room, one of our largest steel producers in America, announcing Buy Clean. So we're often looking at operating emissions and reducing energy efficiency and how we manage and operate our facilities. There's also the embodied carbon opportunity, and when we launched Buy Clean, we did that standing in Toledo at Cleveland Cliffs with steelworkers to showcase the importance of structural building materials and the big four that represent 98% of our federal spending on buildings and infrastructure. So those materials are putting steel in the ground, rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, and also decarbonizing our buildings through major retrofits and the work you're doing portfolio-wide. So I just want to recognize the Better Plans partners and the affordable housing owners and the commercial building owners who all represent the possibility of decarbonizing our country, but also who are out there in the field today looking at equitable electrification and clean energy deployment and making that, taking advantage of the tools and the strategies that you've been building through this incredible community and effort and making that scalable. So I want to talk, I just have a few minutes, and I know everybody's diving into the details on the Inflation Reduction Act. There are so many distinct programs that really cut across manufacturing, commercial buildings, community facilities, and then the state and local partners represented in the room. So I'm just going to highlight a few and want to let you know that we are your partners in implementing this historic climate investment, that we've never had the opportunity to deploy the public and private capital to finance building retrofits and commercial facilities at this pace and scale, and we're in it together. On the tax credit side, there are a few things that Deputy Secretary Turk highlighted yesterday that I just want to come back to, because for commercial building owners, I know you're looking at 179D, and that tax incentive is going to be critical for large-scale commercial buildings, and we want to make sure we're leveraging the full value of tax incentives like 179D. Another one is on the manufacturing side. There's, for the first time since the Recovery Act, we have the chance to deploy a manufacturing tax credit. So that's something for all the Better Plans partners in the room. We should be looking at ways to leverage that and look to Treasury in our office for guidance as we're rolling that provision out. The third one is on solar, which you're all utilizing today, but we're excited about the enhancement and expansion of the solar tax credit and the low-income adder to deploy more solar solutions and help offset the cost to enable solar access for all through community and on-site. So there's a huge opportunity there with the ITC expansion. And then we have direct public investment at a scale and pace that we've never had before. One thing that's available, that's on the street now, is the funding opportunity for $6 billion in industrial demonstration funding. So that means for manufacturing facilities that are looking at industrial electrification, a whole range of decarbonization solutions in heavy industry, there's $6 billion to be invested in heavy industry. So that's a new and promising program run out of the Department of Energy. And then the third one, which I've heard a lot of discussion at this conference already about, is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So $27 billion in financing coming soon. That's going to be a tremendous opportunity to bring needed capital, low-cost financing to retrofit our buildings, our infrastructure. Look for guidance coming soon on that program. We're really excited about it and the partnership opportunities that are there with financial allies in the Better Buildings program to be able to draw on that capital and leverage additional resources to bring low-cost financing to scale across the country in the clean energy and energy efficiency work you're already doing. And then I should mention a fourth, because my HUD colleagues are also in the room, and we're thrilled that HUD now has $1 billion to put out in the Green Resilient Retrofit Program. So further guidance will be coming out soon on that program. And for the multifamily affordable housing owners in the room, that's a tremendous opportunity to bring more direct public investment into the solutions that you've already identified in your portfolios. So it's a chance to get going and leverage public and private resources through the Inflation Reduction Act. The last thing I'll mention, and this is more on the codes and standards side, is we're putting dollars out there for states and local governments to build capacity for low emission codes. We want to use the over $1.2 billion that's available for states and cities to implement and harmonize the latest code standards. And for existing buildings, that includes building performance standards. So that's another good opportunity that we should be thinking about. How do we bring together the resources that are going into decarbonizing our buildings and the standards that are setting the pace for what's going to be required among existing buildings in the future? And then last, we've put out over 100 actions last year to improve our energy efficiency and appliance standards. So this is another area where we are leaning in and finalizing those efficiency standards to provide clarity in the marketplace, to encourage cost-effective and efficient solutions for your plants, for your commercial buildings, for your residential units. And we're going to continue to strengthen those standards and have 30 proposed and final rules coming very soon. So all that to say is there's a breadth of resources and opportunities. As you all know, we encourage you to continue to lead the way. We want to lift up the incredible models of success that you're showcasing, not just at the summit, but in the months and years to come. You are the leaders in this movement, and we want to support you and strengthen the work you're doing. So thank you. Thank you, Maria, for a tremendous summit, and thank all of you in the field for showing the way. And if there's one message I could leave you with is those plans you've been designing and developing and building over the last several years, put them into action. We have the resources, we have the momentum, and we have the support to really deploy. And we encourage all of you to take that vision and to leverage the federal, state, and local resources that are coming your way to move from a vision to full speed ahead. We have the momentum, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Okay, all right. So show of hands, how many people have downloaded the app? Okay, how many have voted for this morning's? Okay, we're trying something really fun and exciting. We have 3 thought leaders and experts from the U.S. National Labs and Georgia Tech here with us today. And on the app, if you haven't voted, you got like 2 minutes to do it. If you go to the home screen, there is a button that says Power to the Plenary. And there are 20 topics there, and you get to choose which are the top ones that these experts are going to talk to. They're a little nervous. They have no idea what they're going to come talk about, and you guys get to decide. So if you haven't voted, please do that now, because we're tabulating, like this is real time, we'll tabulate the votes, they will see them, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how the panel is going to work in a minute. But for 30 seconds before we get there, I just want to share something. No one's seen this before. You are all here for the sneak peek. Just as a reminder, well, first of all, how many have seen the Better Buildings Challenge Swap? How many saw that reality show we did? Oh my God, not enough people. Okay, so about 6-7 years ago, we decided, all of you are doing great work, but if no one knows about the work you're doing, we're not moving the market and accelerating the adoption of energy efficiency. So we had 2 energy teams from 2 very different organizations swap jobs, and we filmed them. So it was Hilton Hotels and Whole Foods. It was the Navy and the Air Force. It was 2 cities, Atlanta and Boston, and it was L'Oreal Cosmetics and General Motors. If you haven't seen them, go to YouTube. They're short. But it just is an indication of we try and make the work we're doing entertaining is maybe not too strong a word, but we're trying to make sure that people understand the work that you're doing, and we make it real, and we highlight the work you're doing, because really Better Buildings, Better Plants, and the Better Climate Challenge are about the partners. We are about sharing your success and your leadership as a way to really accelerate everyone else moving quickly on this path to decarbonization. So what are we doing next? Well, I'm glad you asked. Okay, so we are going to be on the road. We are taking a road trip across America. I'm going to share with you 30 seconds of our first stop on this road trip. We visited 3 of our partners. These are all industrial and manufacturing partners. You will see shortly where we make the first stop. This is the 30-second trailer of a series of videos that we'll be putting out later this summer, but we really wanted to share it with you here today to get you excited. If you're doing things at your facilities and think we should be stopping near you, talk to your contacts at DOE or the labs or whoever you're working with, because we want to profile what's going on, right? Because that's the whole point of this leadership initiative. Leaders are leading, but we want to make sure everyone knows what you're doing, because you're de-risking and demonstrating and sharing what's possible. And it's that action now that Tricia referred to that we really are excited to share. So without further ado, this is going to go by really fast. It's 30 seconds, but we're going to show you a trailer for the road show that DOE is taking to visit partners.
Roadshow Season 1.
We're hitting the open road to decarbonization, traveling across the U.S. to visit Better Climate Challenge partner plants and buildings to highlight their innovative solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Our first stop, Nashville, Tennessee.
How you are actually refilling hydrogen in this vehicle?
This is great. It's amazing.
Exciting, right? It's going to be fun. Nashville is the first stop. It's not the last. We know we're going to Cleveland next, and then we don't know where we're going. So that's why, if you're interested in having us stop, come let us know. If you're a partner in the Better Climate Challenge, we want to profile the work you're doing to share with others. So, okay, now let me go ahead and call the panel to stage. This is going to be fun. We are sort of thinking of this as a cross between Shark Tank, What's My Line, Family Feud, and Choose Your Own Adventure. We decided that what's the spirit of Summit? It's interactivity. And so we want you to be a very active participants in in this plenary. Okay, come on, guys, upstage. So, all right, so here's what's going to do. Everybody voted? All right, so let me just tell you how this is going to work. And because you got to pay attention, because you're going to vote throughout today, right? Remember, I always tell people, I think a bad sign of the summit is when people are on their phones. Okay, no, for this plenary, you got to be on your phones because you're going to vote. So what's going to happen is you have now chosen the top 3 topics. Steve McKnight is going to be our moderator, and he's going to introduce the panel. And then they're going to speak to the top 3, your 3 most pressing questions and topics that you ask these national experts to speak about. Each of our speakers, of our thought leaders, is going to have 3 minutes. And then after that question, you're going to rank how helpful the answers of those thought leaders were to you and your organization, right? So take it through the lens of, was that information helpful as I am looking to spearhead my organization's activities on decarb? So you're going to vote. So that means you have to pay attention, right? So because you're going to vote, and they're going to see it. And then we're going to do that okay. So they're going to go through a first question. You're going to vote. And then on that particular topic or any others, there'll be a couple follow-up questions. We have about 8 minutes allotted to follow-up questions. We're going to try and get through those as quickly as we can. And we're going to do that 3 times. So everybody ready? We're trying this because we try new things to keep it interesting. All right, everyone's voted. All right, so Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're going to introduce your panel, and then we're going to get going.
That sounds great. I'm going to be very brief on introductions because I'm really excited about this Choose Your Own Adventure, Mad Libs mix-up we're going to do here. And we mean it to be interactive. It's an experiment. Why are people waving at me? Mike? Better? Yeah, that's not my voice. That's the amplifier somewhere. So, I'm going to be very short in the introductions because we want to get on this Choose Your Own Adventure, Mad Lib thing as soon as possible. We've got a great panel with diverse expertise who are all interested in sharing their ideas to your questions. We've never done this before, so bear with us. It is kind of a dress rehearsal and first performance all at the same time. So to my immediate right is Tom Kerfis from Georgia Tech. He's a professor in engineering and a real world expert. We're blessed to have him here in manufacturing. And then Mary Ann Piette is from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. She's on the end. And then Karma Sawyer from PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. So really diverse set of expertise and views. and look forward to getting their opinions and thoughts on your questions. Do we have the first question? Maybe we do. I'm looking at a very dated picture of myself right now.
Look good though.
I do look good. Okay. We could do four-part karaoke. We got 4 microphones.
The suspense is killing me.
I know.
We can't see it. I'll go out here. Okay, number 1. What are the most promising technologies for decarbonization? Who wants to start? Tom Kerfis.
All right, well, I'll give it a shot. So in terms of the most promising technologies, I really think it's going to be a lot of the renewables that are out there that are going to allow us to generate power either from solar, from wind. Of course, we're looking, certainly at hydro and so forth that are out there. And I think that, linking into that is going to be a lot of the capability to store the energy as well. So you've got to be able to take that energy when the sun don't shine, all right, and make sure you store it, whether that's in batteries, really cool technologies coming along in batteries. We've seen lithium ion and so forth, but there are new, next generation of types of batteries and chemistries coming along. And then, of course, if you're not moving along, I mean, if you've got fixed locations, you may look at something like a little bit more traditional types of batteries and so forth that we're very familiar with, and by the way, that are also very recyclable. I think a couple of other things that we'll be looking at is even how we deploy our grid. Some of the small modular reactors. I know everybody gets nervous about reactors, but some of the new technologies, for example, you go to Oak Ridge where they're 3D printing a small modular reactor. Those things are awesome, and they're designed to be very safe. They just can't melt down because they operate at a lower temperature. So there's a lot of new technology coming along. I don't think that there's a clear winner, and I don't think that there will be a clear winner because it's going to be very spread out and very distributed. But it's power generation and power storage and then power redistribution. And I think with that, I'll turn it over to one of my learned colleagues here.
All right, you want to take a shot?
I can go ahead and take a stab at it. I mean, there are so many different technologies, to your point, across so many different sectors that it's hard to choose just one. So I'll give you a handful, like Tom did. So I am a buildings person who's worked in the clean energy space for a really long time, and I just cannot get over that heat pumps are having the moment that they are having right now, right? It's super exciting. So I have to say heat pumps. Heat pumps are really exciting. It's an opportunity for you to meet really high efficiency standards, but also swap out fossil fuels for electric ways to heat, water, and the conditioned space. So they have possibilities to be controlled in a lot of different ways. There are lots of opportunities to apply heat pumps in both buildings and to some parts of the industrial sector. So they're probably my number one. Not that I need to choose favorites, but I'm going to choose heat pumps for my number one. Another technology that I think is really exciting is something called intelligent load control, where you can turn building loads off in sequence in a way that's responsive to the power grid. This is a way to reduce costs, be able to manage peak demand, and to be able to mitigate a lot of emissions at some of the most critical times for the resilience and the reliability of the power system. Other ones that I hope this one is the most promising technology. I'm going to cross my fingers because it's a challenging one, and it's long duration energy storage for the power grid. If we want to bring on these large numbers of variable renewable technologies, we really need a lot of buffer within the system. We're getting to the point that storing energy on the grid for a couple of hours is achievable in the soonish time frame. But this idea of doing it in a cost-effective way for more than 10, 12 hours, that's much harder. And so I'm going to call that one promising with a little asterisk because I've got a lot of aspiration that we're going to really crack open a big win with long-duration energy storage. And then I'll throw in one that I'm really excited about, a nascent technology for the manufacturing sector, where you can start to manufacture alloys and composites without actually melting metals. So this is a new technology called SHAPE that Pacific Northwest National Lab's working on. And there are huge energy savings available from just being able to skip that really energy intensive melting step. So that is one that I would encourage you all to keep an eye on. And I'll go ahead and cede my last 30 seconds over to you, Marianne.
Okay, hello everybody. I was here yesterday, and I want to start by thanking Maria Vargas for the great day yesterday. It is a pleasure to be here, and I want to talk about buildings, and I'll talk a little about industry. There's 4 things we need to do to decarbonize buildings, and they all involve very important technologies. The first one is deeper energy efficiency. You've all been working on energy efficiency for the last 10 years at this summit, and one of the things we do before the heat pump is make sure we also retrofit the envelope. So I still want to give a shout out to Envelope Technologies to make sure when we put in that heat pump, we're putting in the right size heat pump, and we're making sure we're making a resilient building that even if the power goes out, there's comfort in that building. So energy efficiency, windows, electrification, those heat pumps are critical. They're critical for electrifying buildings as well as electrifying industry. So we want heat pumps of a variety of shapes and sizes and types, and we want to make sure that we're installing them and commissioning them and controlling them appropriately. So I want to give a shout out to energy management information systems and making sure that our fault diagnostics and our controls are working. So there's a lot of work for all of you to do to make sure you have the metrics associated with those heat pumps, and you're making sure they're also grid interactive. We've been working on 4 types of grid interactions: shaping, shifting, shedding, and shimmying. Shaping, responding to those dynamic pricing. Shedding on hot summer demand response days. Shifting, to make sure you're using that cleanest electricity. So make sure those are grid interactive heat pumps. And shimmy are those fast acting ancillary services, which you can also get from your batteries and storage systems. So when you shimmy, you can think about devices that can interact with the grid. So I said energy efficiency. I said heat pumps and electrification, grid interactivity, and finally those distributed energy resources. So critical to integrate electric vehicles with your buildings and your industry facilities. So critical to think about your on-site renewables and your renewable credits. So we have a lot of technology for DERs that need to be integrated both locally and at the grid scale. So I want to encourage you all to continue to explore these technologies, and we want to make sure that we're investing in decarbonization and not just flat beer and flat soda, but a lot of technologies to enable your materials and efficiency, as well as energy efficiency in your facilities. Thank you.
Well, that's great. We had a variety of answers that all complemented one another. I'm going to take your asterisk as a call to action as a researcher and a technologist to get that asterisk removed. So I think that would be a really good challenge for all of us as we go forward. I'm getting there. So the next thing we need to do is talk about who gave the most useful information. This isn't about people. It's about getting the next set of questions answered. They all gave great information. So the way it's supposed to say is, which answer was most helpful for you and your organization? Was it some of the things that Tom talked about, energy generation, alternative energy generation, Mary Ann and her asterisks, among other things, and the 4 steps that, Mary Ann had 4 steps, and then Karma and her contributions, including her asterisk. So it's now interactive. I see people looking at their phone.
This is
most helpful. All right. The Jeopardy theme that was playing or not playing is now done. We're going to go to the results.
Good job, Marianne.
Well done.
Well done. Wow.
Tom, don't take it personally. I got 0, so I think we're all good. So now we're going to go to the second part of the question and answer period on these answers. And so the software that's got there was able to get questions, and there's up votes and down votes. And the first question, as you guys can see, is cogen was once hailed as a cutting-edge greening solution. But with the greening of the grid and current standards, many cogen assets have become liabilities. What on-site physical technologies do you have the most long-term confidence in? And Mary Ann, why don't you go first, and we'll hear from the other panelists on that question as well.
On-site physical technologies. So we are seeing a lot of campuses around the United States look to retrofit their cogen facilities. And the one I'm most familiar with is at Stanford. Now, I'm at Cal, and I'm not a big fan of Stanford, but I am a big fan of their cogen facility. They have a big hot water tank and 2 chill water tanks, and they have they have heat recovery chillers. So those chillers are actually they're storing hot water and cold water every day of the year. That technology is allowing them to have very efficient heating and cooling systems, and that's a great example of a technology that's kind of replacing, they use that to replace their cogen. So that's one example, and I'll pass it on to my colleagues for another one.
You want to suggest additions there, Karma?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I look at that last part of the question, what physical technologies do I have the most long-term confidence in? I'm actually going to reference part of Mary Ann's initial answer, which is the envelope in buildings, really spending the upfront resources that you need to swap out, make sure you have highly efficient insulation and windows. That allows you to really properly size any sort of equipment you put in place and really make sure that your building is operating in its best possible way. These are really valuable long-term investments, especially if you take the time to ensure that the installations are done properly.
That's great. Tom?
Yeah, I'll just add on to that. So I look at it more from a controls perspective and distributed control. So you've got your great central systems, but throughout the university, for example, Stanford or any of these big campuses, what you're seeing actually is you know exactly what's happening in every room, in every building and so forth, and so you can control things and optimize things accordingly. So again, back to the infrastructure engagement is the ability to do this. Think about what Uber has done for, not Uber, Google Maps, right? So you're going down the road and all of a sudden, bink, it pops up. I mean, even on my commute into work, if Google Maps says, take this exit, I just take the exit, and I know that I'm gonna do better than if I try and go my usual way and second guess AI. So I think that's coming along.
So some of these convergence and various physical technologies and some of the cyber technologies and data and control together are gonna make some advances. Okay, great. Okay. I think we are on to our next question, which is electrification is obviously key for long-term carbon emission reductions. But when utilities across the country receive higher demand, how can the industry ensure that utilities meet the demand with renewables, not more fossil fuels? Tom, why don't you start on this one?
Sure. I think the first part is capacity, and so we've already talked about storage and so forth. So how can you bring that extra capacity online? The other thing, though, you're talking about is even your electric car. So your electric car can be integrated into the grid. And in fact, one of the things that I'm pretty stoked about in terms of how you do this is also a mobile energy storage system. We pay about $1,000 a year to park at Georgia Tech. Why won't I just have my self-driving car drop me off and go charge somewhere where it's cheap to charge, and then bring that charge back and maybe run my home overnight or during the day and so forth. So I think that there are a lot of interesting options going on, and we're going to have actually a lot of flexibility in not only the fixed grid, but what I would say are some of the mobile energy storage capabilities. But again, I won't go on any further. I'll leave a few of those for my colleagues over here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to start sounding like a broken record here, but energy efficiency is the first thing that popped up. I mean, I think of electrification as an efficiency tool, right? If you look at heat pumps, which are really having their moment right now because of this focus on electrification, they are really the reason that so many of you have known about heat pumps for so long before electrification was a big thing. The reason I've been talking about it for so long is because they are a highly efficient solution. Same is true for an electric vehicle. And that is really, I think we need to couple these conversations a bit more. If we want to electrify our loads and have more and more of our economy driven on clean, carbon-free power, we need to be efficient in the way that we're using it. So absolutely, energy storage, building those buffers into the system for the variable renewables to be able to come online, that's a big piece of it. But if we're not responsibly installing efficiency technologies as well, then we really are going to run into some resilience and reliability problems on these peak days.
That's great. Mary Ann?
Those were great answers, and I completely agree. The mobile managed EV that's autonomous is a really exciting vision, and energy efficiency, I agree, is the first line of action, and a lot of you are doing that in your facilities. The second one is flexible demand, with an EV being one example, but flexible demand historically means that you shed your load on maybe the top 100 or 200 hours in demand response. And we're moving towards a time where it's not just how much energy you use, but when you use that energy. So we're trying to embed controls in devices that can receive signals from the grid and automatically move their load to different times of the day. That may be using the building mass as storage, or it may be having some sort of distributed storage. We recently were working with big ass fans, who some of you know, and they're actually thinking about putting a battery in the fan, so if the power's out, you actually still have a little bit of cooling in the building. So there's a lot of new technology that's coming, and a lot of business models. I want to also say that we need to understand how to pay for these technologies, how to connect them to your local utility, and how to save money on your bill. So putting those things together is needed. We need innovation in those kinds of technologies. Thanks.
That's great. I think we're going to go to the next topic. So I think I don't have it memorized, but the second one follows on some of the things we talked about. How do we see the future of energy storage? Karma, why don't you start with an answer there?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really big question. I think it actually is probably one of those like central and key questions, because the future of energy storage is going to determine the future of our generation strategy. It's going to determine the future of the way that we architect and build out our transmission system. So it's complicated. I'll try to answer it from several different perspectives. I mean, right now we are seeing a revolution happening in transportation around electric vehicles. Electric vehicles will be cost competitive with internal combustion engines because of the batteries within them within this decade. So we're going to start seeing uptake of electric vehicles that looks a lot like the uptake of LED lights that we've seen over the last decade. And that will absolutely change the market for lithium-ion batteries in a pretty big way. It's already happening. But energy storage, when we think about long duration storage, that was my asterisk from earlier, I really do think of that as a holy grail when we think about ways to operate and build capacity out in a way that is flexible through the power grid. I mean, that is one where I hope it is the future of energy storage, as I said earlier, but it's unlikely in my mind to really be something like a lithium-ion batteries. There are a lot of technologies that are underway through the Department of Energy's Long Duration Energy Storage Challenge that are looking for ways to be able to do 90% cost reductions for technologies that have over 10 hours of energy storage. And I don't know what the future actually looks like in terms of specific technologies, but I put a bet on it having actually several different technologies. There's like a fly all around my head that's really freaking me out.
It's a big.
Some excitement. Sorry about that, Maria.
I'm just messing it up. You should talk to that guy. Yes. So I think that's going to end up being a portfolio of different technologies that are really dependent on the way the grid is built out. And then finally, if you look within buildings, it's not just about storing electricity. We also need to think about ways to store heat. I mean, water heaters, heat pump water heaters, are a great way of storing heat that's generated hopefully by carbon-free electricity during the day, and then using that hot water later in the day. And that type of thermal storage is really impactful for the built environment. The largest loads in buildings are large thermal loads. So we need to be thinking about what are the best ways that we can use thermal storage technology. I mean, water heaters are a classic example of it. And then what are the best ways to use electricity storage, and how do we kind of optimize the use within them and control them in a savvy way that meets the needs of the people within buildings, as well as finds ways to serve the entire energy system.
Great.
I'm gonna, those are great answers, Karma. And one of the things about this is we don't know what each other are gonna say, so we have to, like, in real time decide how we augment, build on the conversation. But from large-scale storage systems to very small-scale storage systems, we're gonna see storage across our energy technology space. On the large-scale, grid-scale things, we're gonna continue to see things like geothermal coupling, like even using the ground as a source of seasonal energy storage. So you can store heat. They do that in Switzerland. The district energy systems, they heat the buildings in the winter and it cools the earth, and then they use that cool energy in the summer and that heats up the earth. So the earth is actually used as seasonal storage. That's something probably most of us haven't thought about, but you're going to start seeing it around parts of the United States. We're going to continue to see big investments in batteries, and we can't think about storage without thinking about circular economy. So we're all thinking about what on earth are we going to do with all those batteries. So creating recyclable materials and even thinking beyond critical materials to abundant materials. We need to find storage systems that use our abundant materials. And we need material efficiency just like we have energy efficiency. So when you think about investing in storage, make sure you're thinking about that circular economy and how you support that. When it comes to storage in buildings, thermal storage is really exciting. There's a big investment that DOE's been investing with the labs to develop thermal storage, but you're also going to see distributed electric storage. I mentioned electric storage in your big ass fan, and we are even testing an induction stove that has a battery in it. So if the power goes out, you can still cook dinner. So there's all types of sizes and shapes of storage. You're going to see a lot more of it. And you want to invest in it and try it out and share what you're learning so that we can understand how to identify the niche applications and the large-scale applications. Industrial heat is the other one where we want to think about how to create clean industrial heat, and there's going to be new kinds of heat for high-temperature storage systems in industrial heat applications. So thank you.
Thanks. Tom, thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm just going to echo what I've heard from my colleagues over here. And the bottom line, to me, it's going to be very distributed. So the ability to charge, to store energy around the grid, not just at one critical point, is going to be important. And it could be your electric vehicle at home. One of my favorite ones, I love the heat one. So if you've got one of those recirculating pumps for your hot water heater at home, one of the things I notice pretty quickly is, I only run that typically in the morning when everybody's trying to take a shower. And oh, by the way, once I start recirculating it, I've got all sorts of extra hot water in all the pipes. So all of a sudden I don't need as big of a tank and so forth, and it makes a lot of sense. And what we're going to see actually is a lot of these capabilities are also going to be great selling points and very convenient. Even so down in the South, we have a hard time with heat pumps once you get below about 10 above 0 Fahrenheit and so forth. But now you go and you dig your well in there, not well, but you go to geothermal and you start using that temperature in there to get you to the right level, both for heating and cooling. Again, it just makes so much sense. So it goes to distributed, even where distributed means the entire Earth. I think the other thing that's going to be very nice is how do we ensure that even somewhat used batteries. One of the things we see in manufacture, I've got an electric car. Well, I can get an upgrade on a battery pack in 2 or 3 years because the battery technology is moving forward so rapidly that people are trading in their batteries for new batteries. So what are we going to do with the current batteries? We can recycle them, but one key thing that some of my colleagues have really pointed out, there are just a few chemistries for lithium-ion batteries. We've got to label them so that we can actually recycle them, get them back into the circular economy, something simple like that. But then what do you do with all these batteries that are still pretty good, but nobody really wants them in their car again? So I think that you're going to see these types of storage units popping up around the country at key areas. Even, I do love it, the big-ass fan or the induction stove and so forth, those, when the power goes out, but what about when the power is really expensive? Chicago, electricity goes from $3, I forget, it's $3 per kilowatt hour. I forget what the number is, but it's 2 orders of magnitude right before Christmas when we had that really cold snap. Wouldn't it have been great if you had to cook something, if you could just run off the battery on your oven as opposed to paying, some crazy price? So I think that is going to allow us to have a complete distribution across the network and really allow us to fully and maximally utilize that grid. Thanks.
That's great. Okay. We're to the portion of the program where we get to determine what answer was the most helpful for you and your organization. It's not personal, even though we have names up there. Well, I get 0 votes every time. Imagine the Jeopardy theme playing in your ear.
That's it, yeah. That's what we need next time is the soundtrack.
All right, I see heads down, heads up. Time's up. Okay.
Ah, Mary Ann.
Mary
There you
Ann.
go. All right, Mary Ann. Batting 1,000.
Wow.
Mary Ann and
Oh, I got the pity vote. Thank you.
Wow.
It's okay, Tom. You didn't see me go in my pocket, did you? I got this.
Yeah, we should have been handing out. Yeah, that's right. Oh, look.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Time.
So, Tom, by one, I thought it was going to be Mary Ann in a sweep this year. Tom, okay.
It should be.
It should be. Okay. Here we go, the question part. I'm going to give a little bit of time for the questions to populate with the thumbs up and thumbs down, and then we'll go. Is there a question up there, or am I doing the one that's, okay. What can you tell us, hold on. What can you do to instill confidence that electric grid operators and utilities are going to meet the moment as we drastically increase electric demand via electrification, also known as infrastructure build-out, capacity, and reliability? As this round's winner, you get to go first on that one. It's a tough question.
Yeah, I think it is. But I think that there's a reality here that people understand that there has to be an investment in both the grid and power generation and some more of the distributed power generation and storage. So the reality is it's coming. They're looking, of course, at higher transmission capabilities on the grid, but also really taking a look at, how are you going to, you see a lot of people now putting solar on their house, and either solar is feeding back into the grid, so more of a distributed capability, or actually charging up home batteries. And it's the same thing for cars. And I think what people are going to see, especially with apps and so forth moving along, is it's going to be very easy. I mean, if you've got, I know a lot of people have Teslas, very easy to use. You just tell the Tesla, hey, when electricity goes below this level, charge up, unless I'm below a certain amount and so forth. So I think much of this is just going to be, the electric companies are going to come along and work with you. Not so much, sure, they want to make money, but I think it's also going to be just to make sure that they can keep things operating smoothly so that, they don't wind up with some trouble. So I think the reality is a lot of the software issues that are coming along and capabilities that are coming along in the smart systems, smart buildings, smart plants, smart vehicle systems are really going to go towards answering some of that and doing the right things.
Okay, great. Mary Ann?
We are in a remarkable time as we think about building out our clean energy systems in this country and around the world. And the grid operators have such an important role because we know there's actually a need to expand the capacity of the grid and also expand transmission. I know many of you are struggling with interconnect timelines to get new systems up and running, and we need to really accelerate this investment. So I think that the grid operators of the future are going to have to understand the role of flexible demand and the role of storage and how they partner with businesses that are going to be doing demand management as well as using prices to incentivize load response. So we're going to have those devices that can respond, and we're going to have communication technologies that you guys set your price response level, sort of like your car. You're going to do that in your house. When does that battery come on for your induction stove? And the grid operators are going to be, they're going to be looking at data. One of the questions that didn't get ranked high was the machine learning and AI. And the grid operators are going to need a lot of predictive analytics because all the technologies we're putting in are changing the way we use energy. If you charge your EV at home, it's a transportation load, not a building load. And so we have this definition of sectors that are changing. So there's a lot of things that they're going to need our help in getting them the data to do these predictive analytics.
But I just jump in there. Maybe ChatGPT should stand for Chat Grid Power Transmission.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't
Good
help
idea.
myself.
It's going to be hard to follow that joke. So, instilling confidence that utility is going to do the right thing. When I think about that as really a citizen, right, the thing that brings me the most confidence is, there are a lot of federal funds available today that were not available a few years ago. The Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law are providing resources, and there are a lot of technical assistance that will be available through the department as well, to really help make this easier, this transition easier, because it really is a massive change in our economy and the way that the grid is operating. And so those resources are going to be critically important. The other thing that brings me some confidence around what's going to happen here is that the utility sector is really driven on providing reliable and resilient electricity throughout the entire economy. I mean, that is the way that they value their service in a central way. And as this change takes place, that is going to maintain they're going to maintain their focus there. And so the amount of variable renewables and these business models are changing, they will have no choice but to change along with it in order to maintain the service that they've been providing to their customers for so long. And so I think it's inevitable. They want to be able to be responsive to consumer needs, and they have resources available from the federal government to make it happen in a seamless way. So I actually feel very optimistic that it's going to end up happening, and my optimism will even take me further in saying that I think it can happen fairly quickly, even for large infrastructure, which is generally slow to turn over.
I think that's a good point. Those penalties that might be there for first movers have been dramatically reduced with some of the incentive packages. I know we've heard that in roundtables as well. The other thing is this convergence of the digital and physical world and across sectors, which creates new challenges too, in security and cyber and all that. But I think the positives are really exciting as well as we move forward. Okay, we have another question. We have one more, and then we'll go to the last big topic. Is that the one I'm reading, the one on top? This is a good one too. This one I get asked every once in a while. I'm glad I don't have to answer it. Will lithium battery production be able to meet demand? Karma, I'm going to put you haven't gone first yet, so you get to answer that one.
Choose something that I really don't know all that much about. Great. So I'm going to say yes. And the reason I'm going to say yes is because there is so much awareness that both Tom and Mary Ann spoke about during the last question around the importance of a circular economy. And if that technology, the way that we start thinking about lithium batteries and the mineral itself, lithium, starts to become part of a circular system, then that really changes some of this issue that we've all been spending a lot of time thinking on. So I'm going to treat this as a lightning round and hand it over to someone else.
Yeah,
Tom?
I'll just follow on your comment about digital menu. I'm the manufacturing guy, so a lot of our production systems out, just like our buildings and so forth, are going completely digital, which means they're very reprogrammable and so forth. So we can't program to use the current lithium chemistries, new lithium chemistries, and then next generation chemistries that might be coming along. So I think not only are we good to go on lithium, but we're also good to go on whatever next generation technologies move along. Mary Ann?
We are also investing in new ways to get the lithium, new ways of mining, new ways of mineral extraction, getting lithium from brine at the Salton Sea. There are actually lithium in Nevada and California. Mining is always a challenge. It's got some issues around the earth systems, but we are making major investments in that technology as well.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated issue that many people are working really hard on. There's alternatives that people are studying as well. And I think this, with all critical materials, is something that's an important question and one we're keeping our eye on. Okay, we're going to go to the next topic, which is, what will the next decade of building performance standards look like? Mary Ann, I'm going to go with you first because you're smiling over there. So that means you have something to say?
Well, we were chatting about this earlier, that this is a really exciting topic. And from 2020, the number of building performance standards and codes in cities has doubled in the United States. And this is all about existing buildings. So if we retrofit the existing buildings at the rate we're currently going now, and we're trying to meet our targets over the next 20, 30 years, it would take 300 years to do that. So we need building performance standards in cities to be adopted. First of all, what are they? They are requirements for existing buildings to meet certain energy consumption per square foot targets or greenhouse gases per square foot targets, and some of them include water. So there's all shapes and sizes, and over the next decade, you're going to see, we have a living lab in these cities across the United States where these codes are being executed, and keep an eye on them, because what's going to happen is the buildings are going to have to collect data and share it. We've had disclosure laws in some cities, so we're creating the infrastructure to understand how wasteful buildings are and what the targets are for different building types and different sizes of buildings. And you are that experiment where you need to help us show the investments in those energy and greenhouse gas reduction systems, so that you're showing that these kinds of things work, because we need cities and counties around the United States to take these up and make the investments in buildings. It's very different to now think about getting rid of your natural gas and putting it in a heat pump. We also haven't really talked about fugitive emissions from your refrigerants. So keep an eye on those as well. Please look at the leakage that you see and replacing your refrigerants with low global warming potential refrigerants. So the building performance standards are such an exciting activity. Existing buildings are where the action is. Get involved, help your city and county and organizations make these things work, and support the investment that your cities are making to try to accelerate this decarbonization agenda. Thanks.
Great, great. Tom?
Yeah, so Mary Ann's the expert here and so forth, so I'm just going to follow along saying, look, in particular in the digital building, or I look at digital factors and so forth, but you've got these standards coming along, and what you're going to be able to do now is to basically verify, understand what standards you're hitting, where you're not hitting on the standards and so forth, where the standards are actually making sense, all right? So I think we've all come across standards that we struggle with, and like, why did anybody write this up? And so to turn back around and say, yes, the standard works, the metric is right, or maybe the metric is wrong, and how do we move this forward? So a lot of opportunity, capability, and standards. I also see some tremendous flexibility along those lines in terms of control, for example, in buildings. So how do you meet some of your specifications and requirements? There may be multiple ways. Typically, people think of standards as being very rigid in nature, but now we can actually turn some knobs and tweak some things up and so forth, depending on things like what you might be storing. And I love it, storing it in your oven, storing it in your fan, storing it wherever, in your electric vehicle. And so how do we meet those standards in the most, in the best fashion that suits either our environment or what's happening out there, in the world? In some instances, it may be difficult to meet a standard when you're, let's just take a look at climate. Well, gosh, it could get very hot, it could get very cold, and even more so nowadays. So when these types of things happen, can we be somewhat flexible so that we can have a more cost-effective investment and instead of trying to get something that actually meets the standard plus or minus, 3 standard deviations at a time. So I think it's going to give us more flexibility. It's actually going to be more cost-effective. Back to AI. I think it's going to allow us to get back to a lot of the AI capabilities that we see out there. And so it's not just going to be on a building by building basis, but it's going to be on a neighborhood, or an industrial park or a plant type of basis. And even we look at it now, even in terms of your vehicle fleet. So really controlling energy and some of the standards across the entire fleet, depending on what's going on, in terms of air quality, temperature, utilization, safety, the whole bit. So I think that there's going to be a very interesting opportunity moving down the road. Last thing I'll say is watch for a lot of the standards to be moving along and changing based on what we learn from our smart building systems and so forth, because I think that there's a lot that we don't understand. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Carmen, you can bring us home.
All right, well, I think we are at a tipping point for building performance standards. I mean, you all know, you've been coming to the summit for a long time, that this challenge of existing buildings has been vexing us for a really long time, being able to do the retrofits in a scalable way and in a deep way, right? Doing these deep energy retrofits. And building performance standards being invested in the way that they are right now is absolutely changing that game. So Tricia mentioned earlier the funds that are available through the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law to support innovative code programs. There are also a lot of funds that are in place for supporting building performance standards for the existing space. What that means is we really have a comprehensive life cycle covering new construction, major retrofits in existing buildings, buildings to support major energy efficiency upgrades in a way that we have never had it before. And so there'll be a lot of opportunities to drive the market in a really big way over the next decade. There are 30 cities and localities that are working on implementing building performance standards by 2024. I mean, that's next year. And just at the end of last year, the Biden-Harris administration put in a federal building performance standards. There is a huge investment that has a real opportunity to shape the market in a big way. And the things that'll come with that will be a revitalization of our workforce. We're going to need to provide certifications and training for people to do significant amounts of things like fuel switching, where the workforce in the building space, they have not historically done that at a large scale. That will absolutely change the workforce of the building sector. It also will require a lot of engineers to really become more interdisciplinary thinkers, because they're going to need to learn about how smart buildings are changing the game, how policies are changing at the state and local level, and then how to do installations and to be able to retrofit buildings in a different way with both those technical and those policy variables in mind. I think our infrastructure in our building will start to be changed in a big way. Right now, if you're installing a heat pump for a system that right now is powered by fossil fuels, you really have to say, do I have the electrical infrastructure in this building to be able to do that? Well, with 10 years of the building performance standards being in place in commercial buildings and multifamily buildings across the US, you will have that infrastructure in place 10 years from now. And you don't have it today. And that will change the game for future buildings. I'm very excited to see this tipping point coming right as we're seeing more energy storage coming online and variable renewables coming online and heat pumps having their moment, as I mentioned earlier. I think it's going to look very, very different in the next 10 years.
That's great. Okay, I think we're to the voting portion of our program. And as people are voting, I just want to comment that this was a really interesting set of questions and answers that showed, again, convergence, right? There was convergence across sectors. There was a discussion of keeping up with technology. Building codes sometimes don't keep up with technology advances, so how do we think about that? The infrastructure that has to be in place. Really interesting, and hopefully we'll see some of that reflected in the follow-on questions. All right, are we at the end of the Jeopardy music? Okay.
Oh. All right. There you go. How about that?
All right. Okay, great.
Nice job, Carl.
We are now.
I'm a little competitive, so that's a lot.
And once again, I get 0 votes, as it should be. Okay, our first question, which has 12 revotes. How can manufacturers and building owners plan for patchwork BPSs across the country? Can the federal government step in to normalize and standardize? Karma, why don't you give that a shot?
Yeah, I do think that this is a challenging one, right? And Marianne mentioned this. Sometimes it's energy saving, sometimes it's carbon emissions reductions. They can be changing more or less in different ways. And so I can see that this could be a challenge, right? If you had assets in multiple different locations. My rule of thumb is to be thinking, understand your carbon emissions in each of your different locations. Start going for your low-hanging fruit that's easy to hit first, and then look at opportunities for energy efficiency. Generally, those ones you want to align them with your biggest emissions opportunities so you have a no-regret strategy. I mean, overall, there are going to be differences in the way these building performance standards are implemented, as I said, but there's going to be some things that are going to really hit the mark for buildings across the U.S., and so try to identify those first. I'm going to pass on can the federal government step in to normalize and standardize. That is above my pay grade. But I do think that there's a lot of good to be done in your first couple of years, that regardless of the specific building performance standards you have, you can make some really positive changes across the board.
Great. Marianne?
So this is a super exciting question, and I want to say, while DOE is not setting the standards, they are studying the standards. So we are collecting information on how, the number one thing is, do these building performance standards across the country result in changes in energy use in the building stock?
Yeah.
And those investments that are made as a result of these standards are what's critical for us to track. So those of you in the room can help create the case studies, can help create the investment data, can help create the what works in doing this. So whether it's energy or GHG and water being part of it, get involved and help share that data, because we're going to move towards understanding how these work. And I love Karma's comment about workforce as well, because we know that most buildings waste energy. They waste energy, the fans are running at night, lights are left on. There's some low-hanging fruit in just running the building better. And we have the technology now of turning control systems into performance monitoring tools, so you can get the data, do the fault diagnostics, and help just in operations. Now, you also want to make retrofits, those heat pumps, those windows, and other types of technology. So we're going to continue to work with you and work towards best practices in these BPS.
Great. Tom?
And so I'll just wrap up with two thoughts. Number one is it's going to be a little bit of a culture change. So as you order equipment, as you know, whether it's for buildings, whether it's for manufacturing and so forth, we've got to be thinking about, okay, can we get the information out? It's great to say, yep, we need the data and the whole bit, but make sure that as you order it, you can get the information out. On a robot, we might say, well, what's the payload? What's the operational area and so forth. But also, we need the information in terms of energy consumption, power utilization, and so forth. So just a small culture shift there in terms of this is what we need to do. But I think the second thing, I thought that 30-second clip that Maria showed before, go to your better plants, operation and so forth, or better buildings, right? Hear what they have to say. These people really know what's going on. So, I know it's a little cop-out just saying, well, go back to the government and ask them about it, but that's where to go. They really know what's going on, and I have seen them really knock it out of the ballpark in terms of results.
Okay, that's great. I think we've come to the end of this experiment on Plenary. I learned a lot. I want to thank my panelists here for their wisdom.
I'm going to have Tricia weigh in on the last question.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Wild card.
Uh-huh.
Bring in a ringer.
And for an encore, Ms. Tricia Miller.
Sorry. So the question on where does the federal government step in on a building performance standard, I just wanted to address that, as Marianne already referenced. In December, we announced the first federal building performance standard, which applies to existing federal buildings. And we're really excited about the momentum behind that and also the opportunity to align with state and local governments. We're now up to 40 state and local governments that are part of the Building Performance Standard Coalition. Our intent is to harmonize these efforts and not have a patchwork quilt that leads to uncertainty in the marketplace. So if anyone's interested in joining the Building Performance Standards Coalition, it's a great effort supported by our partners at the Institute for Market Transformation, and my colleague Heather Clark is somewhere in the room leading the charge on the federal side. So yes, we can lean in. There won't be one standard that the federal government can roll out that applies everywhere. We will continue to lead by example with the federal building stock and make sure we're lifting up and aligning BPSs with states and locals across the country. So just wanted to leave you with that.
Fantastic, thank you. And let's thank our panelists for a great job done today. And thank Maria for having the courage to try something different.
Just stay here, because we're almost done. And you can see why I asked Steve McKnight to moderate. He was terrific as well. Thank you, Steve. We appreciate it. Yahoo for you guys. As you can see why these are some of my favorite lab and academic people, because their willingness to get up on stage not knowing what questions we're going to be asking. They had 3 minutes to answer. They are such good sports. So thank you all for participating, and thank you guys for being willing to do it. I appreciate it. So we do have one more poll for you guys before you put your phones away, and then before we get ready to leave. As many of you know, this really sort of exploded in a good way. During the pandemic, we do webinars, monthly webinars as Better Buildings. So if you we would love to hear topics that are of interest to you. Many of our webinars have attracted thousands of people. I mean, we really try and and hold them on topics that you're interested in. And so if you'll just let us know some of the topics that you're interested in hearing about, we thought we'd share those with you guys too, just so, like, if you see the topic you're interested in. So, we're gonna do a word cloud, I forgot that. So this is gonna be a word cloud. just exercise on some of the topics that your colleagues, peers, compatriots, competitors are interested in hearing in the room, so as we continue to do that. So anyway, as we adjourn this plenary, it is the last plenary of the 2023 summit. It is not the last session. We have a couple more sessions today, and so we hope that you attend those. Lots of folks have worked very hard on presentations and how to drive interactive discussion during those sessions. So another thing to just remind folks, your feedback, just like you're doing on the poll, your feedback on the sessions, the plenaries, the summit overall, are just really important to us. This is a partnership. Not only is it a partnership in the program and the work we do with you, but it's a partnership in this event, right? We really want to do something that makes all of you want to come back next year and bring. I was talking to someone yesterday who said, we have to bring more people because I couldn't be at every session in the afternoon, and so we're going to bring more people so we can all go to the different sessions that we want to do, and that was just terrific to hear. So, but if you will please provide feedback, not only on the sessions you go into, but you have until the end of today, or maybe the end of this week to do feedback on the session, on the summit overall. So as a parting thought, I just want to say at DOE, we are grateful for your partnership. We applaud your leadership, your commitment, your willingness to set goals. We applaud your progress, and really, in some ways, most importantly, you're willing to share what you're doing. That's the way we're going to move forward as a country. If everyone has to learn this on their own, we're never going to get where we need to be. We got to move now, and we got to move together, and we got to move together smartly. So please continue to be active partners with us. We are here to help. We are here to learn from each other, and I hope that that's what the rest of the summit brings for you. Be in touch, be well, and enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you, everybody.